of Isaiah, the 58th chapter, beginning with the first verse. Shout it aloud, do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion, and to the house of Jacob their sins. For day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right, and has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions, and seem eager for God to come near them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen us? Why have we humbled ourselves, and you have not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting you do as you please, and exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife, and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Only a day for a man to humble himself? Is it only bowing one's head like a reed, and for lying in sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry, and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter, when you have seen the naked, to clothe him, and to not turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here am I. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry, and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in the sun-scorched land, and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins, and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. If you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath and from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's day honorable, and if you honor it by not going your own way and not doing as you please or speaking idle words, then you will find your joy in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride on the heights of the land and to feast on the inheritance of your father Jacob. The mouth of the Lord has spoken. Well, Wednesday was Ash Wednesday, which means it's 40 days until Easter. It's the season of Lent. And for many Christians, Lent is a season of fasting. For Catholics, that first means they don't eat meat for Lent. They eat fish and other products, but not meat. Now, historically, this came about because the Pope owned several fishing fleets in the Mediterranean and was not getting enough income from his fishing fleets. So he ordered the people not to eat meat for Lent. And then to make sure that income continued, not on Fridays either. Unfortunately, the church is a human institution as well as a divine one, and things like that happened. most Christians, especially non-Catholic Christians, Lent is not about giving up meat. And usually if they decide to give up something for Lent, it's a vice. Something they do that they wish they didn't do. I'm going to give up smoking for Lent. Give up alcohol for Lent. Now see, my problem was I can't give up smoking for Lent because I wasn't smoking before Lent. I can't give up alcohol for Lent because I don't really drink. Now I could give up eating certain things for Lent. I tend to eat things I shouldn't. Why? Why is Lent a season of fasting? Well, what is fasting anyway? Well, first off, fasting is a spiritual discipline. It's an advanced course. There are certain things we need to know to be Christians, and there are other things that we don't have to do, but they can be beneficial for us. Fasting is one of those things. You can be a good Christian and never fast. But when it's done right, fasting helps us grow spiritually. It's a discipline. We force ourselves to do without something that we want. And one of the great things, if we do it right, if you're addicted to cigarettes and you find that you can go 40 days without smoking, the physical addiction that nicotine holds on you will be broken in those 40 days. If you're addicted to alcohol but can go 40 days for Lent without taking a drink, you're well on your way to making that a permanent change. If you can go 40 days without eating sweets, you can go 50 or 60. You can change your lifestyle. Unfortunately, this is where we get the fasting wrong for Lent, though. You know, if by day 20 we can't wait for Lent to be over so we can have another cigarette or another drink, it's not doing what it's supposed to. That's the first way we mess it up, because I know God gave us what he called free will, but free will sometimes just seems to be, how can we mess this up? And everything good God gives to us, we find ways to mess up. No wonder he said we're like children. So, fasting is a spiritual discipline. The other reason for fasting, especially during Lent, is sacrifice. Because we're supposed to prepare ourselves spiritually for remembering Christ's sacrifice on the cross. And so by giving up something in our lives, we begin to prepare ourselves to accept what Christ has given up for us. That's well and good. But like I said, we get it wrong. Now, it's not just us, because Isaiah is writing to people about 2,700 years ago. And guess what? They got it wrong too. Now, Isaiah's not talking about a fast for 40 days. He's only talking about the fast for a single day. And so even going one day without, they still got it wrong. The first way they get it wrong is they think that the fast somehow makes them better. Because their first complaint is, God, look at us, we fasted, and you haven't blessed us for it. I went without you. It's got to show what you have done, and then God's got to recognize that and reward it. And God basically says, why? So you went without eating. But that time you went without eating, you were exploiting your workers. By that time, you voluntarily went without eating. During that time, there were people among you who were not eating because they had no food. And you did nothing for them. Yes, you went without eating, but you spent that time figuring out how you were going to cheat your neighbor the next day. You went without eating, but you fought with your brother. So Isaiah is saying, God is saying through Isaiah, guess what? All these things are more important than fasting. And he's even saying, fast from these things. I'd rather you ate and cared for the hungry. I'd rather you ate and lived in peace with your brother. Jesus also talks about fasting. One of the ways we get it wrong, he said when the Pharisees fast, they put on this long face. They go out and are all miserable so that everybody knows they're hungry. Jesus said, when you fast, don't let anybody know you're doing it. It's not about appearing to be better than others. Now, it's not fair to talk about how we get things wrong without talking about how we can get things right. So whether you choose to fast for Lent or for any other period of your life, how do we do it right? Well, the first thing we do is we follow the words Jesus told us. When we make that sacrifice, it's not about us. It's not about showing other people how good we are because we are able to sacrifice. But what if we focus our sacrifice on other people? What if when we decide to go without food, we take the money that we would have spent on food, on that food, and give it to someone who has no food? What if we say, I'm going to eat less, not just because I need to lose weight, but because there are other people out there who have no choice but to eat less. When I was in seminary, we had this debate about being vegetarian or not. And some of the young ministers thought were vegetarians for moral reasons. They believed it was wrong to eat meat. These are God's creatures. We shouldn't kill them for protein when we have other sources of protein. Now, I pulled up when they're talking about food sacrificed to idols, where Paul says, the strong eat anything they want and the weak eat only vegetables. Now, that was pulling things out of context, I know. And another friend said, yes, vegetarian, that's the Native American word for bad hunter. But we had three types of vegetarians. There were the moral vegetarians, and then there were the health vegetarians. They said, I don't think it's morally wrong to eat meat, but I think I'm healthier when I don't eat meat. It's better for me. And then we had the third group, and they call themselves economic vegetarians. And it's, I can't afford meat right now. I get more out of my food budget when I buy fruits and vegetables and carbohydrates than I do when I buy meat. And I fill up more, I can fill up more for my money buying rice and beans than I can buying steak. There are people in our country, the wealthiest nation on earth, who go hungry. When we choose to fast, our fast should help them. Quakers have a saying, live simply that others may simply live. So when you give up something, if you give up something for Lent, if you give up cigarettes for Lent, you're going to save a lot of money over Lent. Do something with that money. Do something for someone else with that money, for someone who needs it. Don't make it just about you. The other thing is, while we're sacrificing and while we're giving up some physical thing, examine your life and say, what attitudes do I need to give up? What feelings for others do I need to give up? Fast from anger for Lent. Let me tell you, that's harder than fasting from anything else, from anything physical. Fast from doubt for Lent. Fast from fear for Lent. Say, I will trust in God for 40 days. I will not be afraid. Don't make your fast merely physical. Make it spiritual. Because there are as many spiritual things in our life that we need to get rid of as there are physical things. This is the fast that God has called for us. To change not just our lives and our bodies, but to give up the things in our spirit that we do not need. Our closing hymn is number 571.